All right, Dan. I'm excited to be going live with you and chatting. I love the business that you've built at Marpipe. Maybe just to kick us off, tell me more about you. How did you get into this, and what were you interested in? What were you working on when you started Marpipe?
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Great to be on. Was looking forward to this conversation. Yeah, Marpipe. How did we get into this whole thing? It actually started back in my past life before I was running Marpipe. I was actually running a digital marketing and creative production agency here in New York. We were making ad creative and running ad campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, Google, for a bunch of venture-backed direct-to-consumer brands here in New York. And one of the things that we really quickly discovered was kind of the biggest problem that we had as an agency was creative testing. Um, Creative is the most important element to performance. What I mean by that is what your ads look like has the biggest impact on how well they do. To some people, that's obvious. To some, it's not. But even the smallest visual variables like colors, words that are used, which version of the image you choose to use, all has a major impact on performance. And so the idea is we are really bad at arbitrary decision making. Like the way that we decide what our ads look like today
Mm.
is pretty much as simple of a process as you think it is. Like it's a bunch of people sitting in a room just doing arbitrary taste making, just being like, I think that'll work best. And Oftentimes, almost every time, we're wrong actually about what we think will work well. Trying to predict the future and predict what'll work famously doesn't go well in most scenarios. The house always wins. Our idea is you should just test everything, right? The thing is, doing that requires an immense amount of resources and time and money. And so we wanted to build tools that help us render out all these different versions of what our ads could look like, test them live, and then analyze all of that information that we get from all of this high volume testing. We were doing all of that manually, and we're looking for ways to automate it. No vendor existed that could facilitate something like that for us, so we decided let's build it ourselves. And that's where you get the kind of early start of Marpipe. Marpipe is a platform that automates the entire creative testing process. We think most ads are bad because humans decide what they look like. We should not decide what they look like. We should let the audiences that we market to decide what our ads look like. And Marpipe enables that through high volume creative testing.
Hmm. Keep going. So I'm with you. How would an audience decide what an ad look like? Practically speaking, how would that work? How does it work?
Yeah, so we've all been in that room before where we're trying to decide what a landing page should say or what an ad
Mm.
should look like and what image we should use and what the look and feel of it should be. And There's debate that happens in that room, right? And
Hmm.
someone has some opinion and you have another one, and everyone wants to make their vision come across, right? So what we do in the scenario of Marpipe actually is you could think of it as like a design platform for people who work in advertising or marketing, like a Canva or like an Adobe, right? It's like a canvas. And with the work of building one ad, you can actually render out a bunch of different versions of it. And here's how that works, right? So every ad that you see is actually just like a combination of visual variables, like a background color, a product image, and some words, let's say, right? That would be a simple ad. Um, we would we would associate five different versions of the background color, like from your brand, with the background, five different versions of the product image, and then five different versions of the copy. Then it would render out every permutation. So 5 times 5 times 5, 125. We make every possible combination. That happens automatically on Marpipe. So with the work of making one ad, you can actually automatically generate like 100 different versions. Um, then you click a button and it integrates with where you serve ads like Facebook or Instagram and runs it against your audiences live. So all of these ads get launched and run live. And the way that we determine what's best is through the audience actually clicking and buying things, right? So whatever performance metric you're using to track performance, That's exactly what's happening. It's a live test. This isn't like a focus group or something like that, right? Like these are all run live, and then you get to find out really two things from that. One, you get to find out like the best case scenario version. What is the best combination? What is the number one combination of background color, product image, and text that performs the best? That's the one that we want to scale, right? So we want to take that and like invest a lot of money behind that. And then you also get to learn from this kind of testing, you actually get to learn why, like what visual variables most impact performance for your ads. So like, for instance, something like, hey, every time we use background color number 3, performance goes up by like 73%, no matter what we combine it with. Like this is always bringing performance up, right? And then on the other side, maybe like copy number 5 is like always bringing performance down. Like that is, we should not use that value prop. So it tells creatives much more than they could ever learn through just simple A/B testing, because it tells you like, how does the actual visual variables that are present impact performance no matter what else they're combined with. And this is new data for brands. Like brands don't know this about their own creative yet. And it's only this sort of multivariate testing that allows brands to understand those details about their creative.
Yeah, I would imagine most of the time creative directors or ad managers are just making the ads 100% themselves and then shoving it into AdWords or Facebook, Instagram backend, and then measuring the output of that. Do these products, Facebook, Instagram, Google, do they have APIs so Marpipe integrates right into that, anticipating there to be outside products like Marpipe that just pump in ads and optimize that process? I imagine,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So we're integrated with the APIs of these ad
Mm-hmm.
platforms so that you can just pump the creatives that you build in Marpipe, you can just upload them to Facebook, Instagram, Google Display, and then run it all there. And then you'll get feedback on like, which variables do well on Instagram versus Facebook versus Google Display, right? Um,
Mm.
and so yeah, it's a native integration. And the way to think about it is it's like an operating system, if you will, for creative testing, right? For brands. Like you build creative tests, like big creative tests in Marpipe, and then you launch them to wherever you're running ads. And then you get all of this feedback in one place. What you highlighted though is really interesting. Like, how does it work today? Like today, creative directors and designers, you know, if you go up to most people in marketing and you ask them like this very fundamental question of like, how do you decide what your ads should look like, right? Very few people have a good answer to that question. In fact, almost nobody does,
Mm-hmm.
right? The answer is somewhere in between like vibes, like we just like it, and like some sort of rudimentary, like we've made, 3 or 4 different ads and tested them and this one worked best, right? And so A/B testing is when you like make, 2, 3 different concepts, run them, and then you find a winner. But all you
Mm-hmm.
know is which one won, but you don't know why, right? And so you're then stuck in this continual guess. Since you don't know why, you don't know like what to do more of, what to do less of, and so you're always just kind of guessing and checking, and that's like a really inefficient process. So if you have data telling you, why things are working, what to do more of, what to do less of, you then have a data-driven creative process. And ultimately, we think like advertising creative, it's not an art, it is a science.
Yeah.
And you can
Yeah.
quantify every piece of what makes your audience react to something.
How do you, this is one thing I remember debating internally was, do you always run the best performing ad, even if it feels wrong, like if the vibe is off and it doesn't feel like the colors feel wrong, the woman on there just is not your demographic, or the person, whoever is there. Like if you look at the ad, there's an emotional reaction that like the founders would have to it to say, how on point does this feel? How do you see, how do you think about guiding like creative directors when this is a complete misalignment? Like we come back and we say, the creative director says our best performing ad is this one, and the founders look at it and like, oh God, I hate everything about that. Do you say, hey guys, go for the numbers, like pump it in there, or yeah, what's
Yeah.
your sentiment?
So we are in the era of performance creative, right? And what that means is, like we operate. Marpipe is a product that is used by people who are optimizing for performance rather than for brand marketers who are optimizing for like compliance to a brand book, right? And so like one question that we ask every customer before we do business with them is like, if I showed you two ads, and one of them was you really liked it, but the other one you hated the way that it looked, but option number two, the one you hated, performed two times better than the one that you liked, which one are you going to invest more money into? And for people who say option number one, I only want to run what I like, regardless of the performance, they're not a good customer from our pipe, right? That is like, that's antithetical to, what we're trying to
What
do
if
here,
what if you put
yeah.
Marpipe aside for a second and give like a steelman argument for when option one is ever a good decision? Like, does it make sense?
Yes. So like it people are so concerned about brands, and really there's only like only the Fortune 500s that are consumer facing really have the reach that's big enough to be that concerned about their brand. Like
Mm.
if you're running a SMB or like even a mid-sized to larger company, none of your audience knows that you're not complying with your brand guidelines. And the whole point of brand guidelines in the first place is to ensure, like, once you found something that works well, to like ensure you keep doing it so that it works well for your audience, right? But if new things start working well for your audience, that should influence your brand book, and your brand guidelines should evolve. Like you should, founders shouldn't, and creative directors and marketers shouldn't think that they know what's best for the market and force it upon the market, even when the audience is like, no, we're not clicking that ad, we're clicking the other
Mhm.
one, right? Like it is our job as marketers to like listen and respond to the market, and that's how we get the best outcomes for our business, right? So like if you're Nike, for instance, then I get it, right? Like if you found something that works better but it's like totally weird and not something you would expect Nike to put out, I get it, because like you guys have invested so much into your global brand image, and there's very kind of defined guidelines of what exactly that is. You should stick to that probably if you're Nike, right? Because you've invested so much in your branding. But for all of these companies that are growing on digital advertising, which is almost every direct to consumer brand today, that should always be evolving based on audience creative preference, right? And you
Mm.
should always be discovering new things and iterating on that.
Do you see many surprises? When I'm thinking about the ads that would convert best, I'm picturing like 25-year-old attractive big-breasted woman in a red dress sitting on a sports car. Like if okay, so that to me would make sense, where you're appealing to the evolutionary biology mechanism inside the male brain. And then there's like, I think about this as there are, if I lay the evolutionary biology lens on top of society, like human beings, I can see why a lot of the advertising that we see in like magazines and like billboards and things, how creatives can come up with that. But I wonder, are there other, like, that would be like a local maximum. It'd be like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are very interested in that. I saw a stat that was like, it was like, uh, on the vast majority of men's health magazines are women, like women on the
Yeah.
front, and on like almost all of the women's health magazines are women as well. So like there's a convergence there, and I think, are there other things that people, because it's like a psychological experiment that you're running. There's some variance in
That's
colors,
right.
and you might not be able to understand why that is, but then there's some that you're like, oh, people are interested in traveling, so they love the idea of a person travel. Is there patterns of society that you're sort of getting a window into the psychology of through these advertising patterns?
Yeah, exactly. Like we are discovering unexpected and new things all the time. And the reason that brands should always be testing is because these sort of creative best practices, I say in air quotes, are always evolving, right?
Yeah.
And also different for every individual brand, right? So there are some brands who benefit from, like let's say, like unisex athleisure, right? Or whatever
Mm.
it might be. Some brands will benefit from using women, some from men, some from using bright colors, some from dark colors, right? Every brand is different, and you need to discover what works for you. Following creative best practices is just like copying, like copying word for word the other kid's essay that's next to you,
Hmm.
right? It's like first off, like it's you're creating an echo chamber, right? And second off, like that's not going to result in a good outcome for you, because just because it works well for them doesn't mean it's going to work well for you. And so oftentimes, like creatives and marketers, or when they do apply this test everything mentality, are oftentimes really shocked by what they discover. It's
Mm.
almost always never what you think would work. Um, we have and then so like zooming out though, like across, because we have all different customers in different categories. Like we have consumer apps, we have like retail, fashion, food and beverage, B2B, and so we do also see trends across these categories emerge.
Mm.
Like, for instance, if you're advertising a consumer app to men in finance, like black and white is like a really good best practice for you right now to use, for instance. Like that's one of
Mm.
those small little tidbits, right? The thing is, sometimes that's not always true for everyone. And also, these things evolve over time, which is why you should like always be testing and retesting your assumptions. You'll always discover new performance. And so yeah, like creative teams, they use Marpipe, just get to follow what the audience tells them they like, rather than just trying to kind of push through whatever they like. Because what you
Yeah.
like as a creative is different from what your audience will like. I guarantee you, every single time. We
Yeah.
see it in
Yeah.
every test.
That seems like it would be the first like maturation hump you'd have to get over. Like I imagine like your, 20 something early intern marketer has that intuition that what I like is what other people would like. How about this? I'm trying to think how sophisticated, how to ask you how sophisticated the marketing tactics are. And one way that comes to mind is, do you see a wide variance in the demographics of different demographics? Like if you mentioned the young male finance demographic, are people generally pretty predictable, or do you see like maybe older people have a way wider variance of what works on them and it's harder, whereas maybe if you're younger, you have less experiences in life, and so maybe you're more malleable. I would imagine another kind of interesting thing I'll throw at you, and I'll let you respond, is I think generationally, the older generations are more similar to each other because they would have had less content channels available to them. Like my grandmother probably had 5 radio stations and 4 TV stations when she was like 0 to 40 years old. But now your average kid that's 20 years old today has 100,000 influencers they could possibly be listening to. Like the chances that I'm consuming the same content, have the same news feed as someone my age is close to 0 today. Is that a factor, or how is it?
Audience, as marketers, we really want to try to cast these like demographic generalizations, right? Like we want to
Mm-hmm.
say like we know that these people behave this way and these people will do this. But in the world of advertising creative, you could kind of throw that out the window,
Really?
right? It is very unpredictable, actually, right? So like just to give you kind of an anecdotal example, I can't say the names of who they are, but we had these 2 brands that were fashion brands, selling mainly dresses as the hero product to mainly the mom, middle-aged women demographic. And if I showed you their websites and their brands, they're so similar, like same price points, similar products, similar angle, same audience. if you compare these websites, you would think that they're the same company if I hid the logo, right? But actually, what works for these brands was like totally different, right? Like one of them
Hmm.
leaned into this like sustainable, eco-friendly value prop that worked really well with their audience, and with the other brand, these were both kind of like vegan-friendly brands. That was like a terrible thing to talk about with the other brand, right? Like the audience hated it, even though if it was the same audience, right?
Really?
And so you're like, how is that possible? And we don't know how these kind of creative and visual and text related differences, like we don't know why audiences react differently to them from different brands. All we know is that they almost always do. And so it's really hard to kind of like generalize and extrapolate these learnings across categories like as a hard science, as like as a truth, right? Sometimes it works. Sometimes saying like, oh, you should try this because that brand did it and it'll work for them. Sometimes that works. Usually it doesn't. And you discover something else that's unique about your brand along the way. For the other
That's
brand in
interesting.
that instance, talking about the influencers that were wearing it worked really well for the other brand, whereas for the other one, although they had same caliber influencers, did not work well for that brand, right? Like we don't know why. We just know it is. And if you're optimizing for performance, like test it yourself to find out what works for your brand.
Do you think the individuals who are receiving these ads consciously are aware of why they're either interested or not interested, or it's more subconscious impulse decision on?
No, these consumers aren't aware that they're constantly being exposed to creative tests.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of when you see ads in Facebook and Instagram, like there's a chance that some of the ads that you've seen were actually creative tests being run on you, and you're part of like a big audience group that's being tested on. And you may have seen an ad, and your click or lack of thereof, was a data point used to like evaluate this experiment that this company was running on you as an audience. Um, Consumers aren't like aware that they're making these decisions. They're being run at like broad audience levels.
Mm.
So you can only just kind of treat the audience as like a monolithic entity that has certain preferences that they'll voice.
That's super interesting. An individual, would they usually be able to articulate why they are, for instance, not interested in the vegan pitch for luxury brand B, or are they like generally the
Yeah.
response is like, oh, I don't know, I mean, it's not interesting. Like, could they say why they
Look,
find one brand? I mean, because it's kind of interesting
yeah.
because it's like this emergent psychology of a group where every individual has no idea why they like what they like or even what they like and what they don't like, but then collectively there's this emergent pattern to it.
Yeah. So like as a psychologist, I would be interested why, but as a marketer, I'm not. Like really, it doesn't really matter, right?
Really?
Why? Because you're just optimizing for performance,
Yeah.
right? Like you're gonna do whatever works best and whatever gives you the highest return on your advertising spend. As a marketer, that's your job, right? So like if the reason why doesn't really matter if it's getting someone to stop, click, and buy something. But I do think it's interesting to like speculate on that, and so this is where like survey grouping falls short, right? So like back in the day, before high volume creative testing, like the advent of these large social platforms with these huge audiences like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, they made this kind of testing possible. This wasn't possible before, back in like the TV or radio era, or the print era. Um, you couldn't run high volume creative
Hmm.
testing. And so what they did instead was survey grouping,
Hmm.
right? And so they would like have a bunch of different concepts and get people in a room and tell them, have people react to certain things. And, survey grouping is definitely like an imperfect science. Like people are bad at articulating like why they like or don't like something. And oftentimes there's like this kind of survey grouping bias that's in effect too, where everyone wants to say that they like what they think the most amount of other people will also like. Like you want to be seen as like a reasonable, rational person. So oftentimes it actually skews your answers. But when you have the privacy of your own cell
Mm,
phone when you're in the bathroom and it's just you clicking around, you'll click whatever you really will in your own private environment,
that's
right?
such a
And
good point.
the results of those things are different.
Yeah, hugely different. I mean, I can just knowing human beings and knowing myself, it's like, yeah, that's so true. You just would represent what you click on much differently than what you actually do. Does it change much? I mean, do you see over the
Like,
years things change significantly? Like you gave examples of little tidbits or pieces of knowledge that you've seen patterns. Do those, is the half life on that like 2 weeks or is years or indefinitely?
so it depends on how much statistical significance you've gathered
Mm,
behind those insights. So it depends on like how big the sample group that you've shown it was, how big, like how many people saw it, essentially determines like how long you can depend on those insights to last. And like to show it to more people costs more money,
mm,
right? So like you can run like really high fidelity, high confidence tests that are more expensive because you show them to more people, but those are insights you can be more certain of and lean on for longer. But typically, we encourage companies to retest things after about 6 months or so on average. And you'll typically start to see different results when you retest things 6 months later.
mm.
Consumer creative preferences and creative trends are always changing and in a constant state of flux, which is why you should always be re-questioning your own assumptions around your brand. Um, and yeah, like I mean, the proof of pudding is like I guarantee you, Mike, like you, me, and everyone else listening to this has clicked ads that they've seen that they wouldn't want other people to know that they clicked or are curious
Oh yeah,
right? Like, and that's why survey grouping falls short ultimately,
yeah,
right? You're getting real unfiltered audience clicks and behavioral data as it will be in the real world rather than in this simulated kind of survey group environment.
yeah,
That
yeah.
doesn't translate perfectly to the real world.
Yeah, I would imagine even surveys fall short if people are completely anonymous because they are reporting what they like to believe that they click on, given that they're taking the test at 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of seeing the ad at 2 a.m. and they're half drunk or something. So that's interesting. I was going to ask you about this. So if I kind of observe the abstract nature of ads, you have text-based ads, Google prominently with AdWords. That's probably the most mechanical. It's just a combination of different ad copy. There's no images. Then you have images primarily on, I think of Facebook, probably Instagram too, but even Instagram I think of as more video, so like moving images. And as you get into more elaborate creative, the spectrum of creativity widens tremendously, and it's, I would imagine, harder to like A/B test a video because a video even 10 seconds long or 5 seconds long, you could be doing all sorts of different things. Whereas like an image, you're a lot more restricted, and certainly text, if you have 30 characters or something, you're very restricted. Do you view it as like, okay, going forward, I would imagine as TikTok takes over, Instagram takes over Facebook, um, we'll put Twitter on the sidelines. I'm curious to ask about that. But do you see this, what you're doing fundamentally as being applicable in the video format as well, or it just becomes more complicated?
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't do creative testing for those like just simply text-based formats like
Yeah,
AdWords.
yeah,
Actually, because the format is so restricted, Google has already built out testing tools
yeah.
for this that like multivariate test that stuff. So like you don't need our help there.
Hmm.
Where it gets really interesting and complex, and where you do need software to come in and automate and simplify things, is testing visual variables for images and for video, and that's exactly where we are. We play in images and video,
Oh, you do
right?
video
So
too. I didn't realize that. Yeah,
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 yeah, we do video, and we're actually, uh, we're talking to, TikTok is like a really interesting example, right? Like there are testing on TikTok. There's so much potential there, and brands are really, really eager to do it. The way that video testing works is you treat each snippet like a variable. So like, let's say like there's a creator doing an unboxing, right? And it's like we've all seen those like unboxing like videos where it's like oh my God, so like my package came in and like let's open it up and oh this is so like so like smooth and nice and this is a great experience. And then they'll be like, check it out, at this website, right? So like that's divided into intro, value prop in the middle as a clip, and then the call to action as a clip at the end. So there's like three clips, right? So we want to test three different intros, one funny one factual one, and one random one, right? And then we'll test three different middle like body parts for the value prop. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's convenient, right? Whatever, right? And then on the call to action, three different calls to action, like order now at this website. Here's a discount code and free shipping, right? And so you can create, that's 3 times 3 times 3. That creates 27 different versions, right? And now you can find out which intros work best, no matter what they're combined with, which value props resonate the most, and which calls to action do. So that's how it works for video. So we're doing the same thing there, and working on integrating with more video platforms right now as we speak, actually.
It's interesting. I feel so drawn to understand the bigger picture of it. Even though I totally get your point that from a marketer perspective, you just want to be driven towards what's results, what performs best. But I feel a little bit like it's like you're kind of like there's I mean, tell me your reaction to this, but it seems like there would be bigger patterns to understand that could they be outside the realm? Like somebody had to come up with, even in your example of there's 3 intros, 3 middles, 3 value props, like somebody has to come up with the concept of an unboxing. And that is like a presumption that I live at home and I received a box in the mail and then like I took the thing out and all that could be like I'm picturing Red Bull could be like, I'm going to unbox out of an airplane, or I'm going to, who knows, right? We're limited. There's no limitation to the different types of video content and even image and kind of text, but not really. But as like, imagine, okay, our world is now like Meta comes out in a couple of years with this virtual reality or augmented reality. We're now serving ads in 3-dimensional forms. And so you have to, I feel that, and this is intuitively, I feel that there's a limit to how scientific we can get, and the pendulum might swing backwards to a more creative, human-generated ad campaign. Maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah.
I don't know, or maybe it just
Yeah.
completely
The
optimized.
way that we think about that is like, so humans will always be required to operate the system, right? So because Marpipe is a self-serve platform, it's operated by creatives. We think of it as like introducing a forklift into the warehouse for the first time,
Hmm.
right? So like previously you had like manual laborers lifting boxes by hand and you needed a lot of them to move a pallet and it was hard work, right? Now you can actually just take one of your laborers, train them to use this new machine that allows them to effortlessly move the amount that it would take 20 people to move, just by operating this new machine. You still need the person operating it and giving the inputs, but you can automate a significant portion of the actual labor that's involved in making and generating all of these different ads. Creative volume is a huge problem for brands today. They need more and more and more creative. They're very hungry for it. And so creative automation fixes that problem, but it doesn't like replace the designers or creatives entirely. It just allows each one of them to do significantly more than they otherwise would be able to.
How about this? Do you see founders coming to either Marpipe or just more generally running creative ads with the intention of trying to figure out product market fit? So like, just saying, hey, I'm going to make a bunch of ads for a bunch of different ideas I have, drive traffic, and just measure that as a way to develop a brand, understand what I'm going to build. Is that a successful strategy that you've seen, or what do you think about that?
So one of the most interesting use cases and applications of Marpipe that like we didn't even really think of before, but like we have customers just doing it under our noses, and when we found out, we were like, this is the coolest thing ever, was actually so usually traditionally you have to like manufacture and think of a product, manufacture it, and then advertise it, right? And if the advertising doesn't work, then like damn,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to move that product. Um, So imagine flipping that in reverse, right? So imagine we have like a rough product concept, like a blender bottle, right?
Hmm.
And there's like these three different builds that we could make, like where the blender's on top, blender's on the
Hmm.
bottom, different versions of how the product could look, and then different colorways as well, right? Or even with a food product, actually, like this is a real live use case, like with food products, different potential flavors and ways to brand the packaging. So you can render all of those out, all of these different possibilities, and advertise them first before they even exist.
Yeah.
See which ones generate the most clicks. When people click the ad for the product that doesn't even exist yet, they go to a landing page that just says, "Hey, if you're interested in this product, it's not made yet, but just drop your email here, and like we'll let you know if we produce it." Right? Boom. Count that as a proxy purchase. Right? Count that as someone raising their hand saying, "I
Hmm.
would buy this."
Hmm.
Right? And that way, you could actually simulate all of these product possibilities and already know what your return on ad spend, unit economics, and how much it's going to cost you to generate a sale in advertising for that product. And then go back and be like, hey, product version 34 is like an absolute hit. Let's produce that. Right. And now you already know you could just turn that ad back on. And once it's made and ready to ship, like you already know you have product market fit.
Yeah, that's such a great idea. I did this manually years ago, and it just felt like a no-brainer because you don't need to build any product to sell a product, which is just, so counterintuitive to the way that product development and distribution has been for so long. But yeah, I would imagine we'll see more of that. I mean, if people are not already doing that today in large numbers.
People are doing it. Start innovative startups are like definitely ahead on this
Yeah.
trend,
Yeah.
and folks are coming up with product concepts and just marketing them as a way to validate them first, which is amazing and works so much better than just taking a guess. Like launching a new product is like a major expense, right? Like manufacturing something new. It's a huge risk.
Mhm.
You can just de-risk that by marketing first to know it will sell before you even make it, which is amazing and something I think most people making new products should do to de-risk
Yeah.
the investment. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about the different platform comparisons? Like you have, who are the major players? You have Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Google
Yeah.
AdWords, Twitter. Is there anybody else? And I'm curious how Twitter is like. Where are the guys trending now? Who's exploding? Who's kind of decreasing in effectiveness or popularity?
For performance marketing, for people who want to spend money for the purpose of generating sales, there is like a very clear top three, and it's like in terms of like what works best and what actually also gets the most amount of performance marketing spend. So at the very top is Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram. Then below that, by like a decent amount, is Google.
Hmm.
And then there's a big drop off. And then number three is TikTok, right? TikTok, though, is the fastest growing one, but by far has a lot less spend than Facebook and Google get in terms of advertising spend today. They're kind of like barely a blip on the radar, but they are third place. Like the two are just so far ahead. TikTok is catching up quickly. On
The first
the
two,
other, yeah,
sorry, just to clarify. So you put Facebook in there as well. It's not just Instagram, like Facebook and Instagram, Facebook, Google.
Facebook still works insanely well for
Really?
performance marketing, and Facebook and Instagram together are definitely still the top channel by spend.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is the lack of ad spend on TikTok due to just the probably internal lack of development of the ad platform? Like you have to get users first and then build ad platform. Assuming today TikTok was like had an optimized ad platform, where would they be with that assumption in mind?
Yeah, so like definitely their platform is still kind of in the developing stage, and they definitely have. I mean, they've got their work cut out for them. Those engineers are working overtime to catch up, but they also have they also don't have as developed of a partnership ecosystem as Google and Facebook does. Like, what does that mean? So Facebook and Google and these ad platforms in general, they focus on doing like a certain specific things that are very complex and very well. But for everything else, like creative automation, it's not something they're focusing on. It's not a core competency. They bring in partners like us and they welcome us and work with us and give us their APIs so that for their clients who say, hey, I'm an advertiser spending a ton of money on Facebook, but I just need more creative and I would spend more money on Facebook if I had more creative to test, they send them our way. Like they refer us business. So a partnership ecosystem allows you to retain more customers and have them spend more because you have all of these like added capabilities that you can bring to the table that like you didn't have to develop, someone else did. TikTok is also kind of in the early stages of building that out as well. I'd say that like within due time, if they continue at the trajectory that they currently are, it's going to take some time to catch up just because it takes time for marketers to like adapt to new things. And these people making the spend decisions, who are spending $1 million a month on Facebook ads today, they're dipping their toes into TikTok, but they really need to see the same level of performance come out of it in order to invest, like really move all of their budget across to the other bucket. And that's just taking time. TikTok performance is like not as hot as some people find really amazing winners, but it's really kind of much more of a crapshoot. And definitely today, Facebook and Instagram are more reliable performance marketing channel. Twitter is in a separate category, by the way. Twitter is like an awareness play. Twitter is not known as good for performance.
Why is that, do you think?
Yeah, their ads product has just never been built out in a performance friendly way. So, if you're optimizing for like purchases or leads, don't go to Twitter because their platform is not good at matching your ads with customers who are ready to take out their credit card and buy something. The other platforms got really good at that. This is a engineering and product development specifically, problem I think that Twitter has. But Twitter is good for just pure reach and awareness. So like if you want to just blanket Manhattan with an announcement of a new movie that's coming out, and that's why the stuff you'll see on Twitter is mostly like awareness based, similar to what you would see on billboards in your town and stuff like that, rather than trying to get you to buy something right there.
It seems far less compelling. I imagine that's why Twitter just hasn't really grown much. It's like maybe this is, do you view this as their existential problem is they don't have like a direct ad platform?
Yeah. Twitter, I think Twitter product development has definitely slowed down. Their product innovation is not at the level that Meta, Google, and certainly TikTok are at. It's just not comparable from an organizational structure. The the capitalizations of these companies are totally different. Twitter's like just a much smaller company overall. So yeah, it just doesn't get I think a fair chance to compete. Like it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem. Like they're a much smaller company because they didn't build out a good ads product, and now they can't build out a good ads product because they're a much smaller company.
Yeah.
So,
although the second one seems like, well, you could still build out a good ads product. They're not small. Elon's going to buy them. I think that deal's going to go through. It's like 50 billion. Like how many billions do you need to build out some ad software? Is it like, I don't know.
Yeah, man. It's a good question.
It seems like the most important thing in the company.
Yeah.
And it's not even, you don't even have to change anything on the front end. It's like all back end advertiser interface stuff. Like it's no risk to the user experience.
Right. I think you're right. I think that definitely ads platforms have been built out on much scrappier, smaller budgets. But sometimes when you have one of these later stage, far past IPO companies, excitement and your ability to attract talent that really moves and shake things just kind of fizzles out over time and plateaus, and you kind of just kind of settle into a status quo. An acquisition could certainly shake that up.
Yeah.
And I think I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. What do you think? Twitter 3 years from now, are they say their market cap today, we'll just put it at 50 billion. Where do you think they are in 3 years? Assuming the deal
Three
goes through,
years.
assuming Elon
I'm
is
gonna take
involved.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a bull case and say that assuming Elon gets involved, it can actually 2.5x in 3 years. Um, I think that first off, there's just going to be an immediate like public market reaction, similar to all Elon companies that like are polarizing, where he has his like loyal band of supporters that invest in anything he touches, and he, that Elon effect, right? I also think he's going to just replace the talent and leadership and bring in really because his companies attract top talent, and so I think that they're going to be able to shake things up and also get a boost in support from the public markets too, and other investors. I'm excited to see that world, man. I think it'll and certainly like once our customers are performance marketers, and so like when they start pounding the table, being like, give us a TikTok, give us a Twitter integration, certainly we'll build one.
Mm-hmm.
But we're kind of far from that world right now. They're pounding the table for TikTok today, and so that's what we're working on.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm with you. I'd love to see that. I mean, I personally like Twitter, so I hope they improve and he comes and shakes things up, because sometimes companies just get stale and they need it.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's true.
Last thing I want to ask you about is your take on the international landscape. So the U.S. certainly has been, I'm sure, and is and will continue to be a dominant country for performance marketing. Are there other countries that are emerging? Do you have visibility into that? And yeah, I'm curious if you
Yeah.
have any insights.
So that's a great question, and there's actually a very compelling answer here, and like a very strong one. So Latin America is definitely the biggest emerging market for e-commerce and the kind of infrastructure and tooling that comes around it. So um, as a developing market overall, right, Latin America right now, like e-commerce and just performance marketing, digital marketing, right? It's not nearly as big as in other developed markets today, right? Like it's much less common for people to like buy direct to consumer goods on one-click checkout sites online in Latin America today. That is changing very, very quickly, right? So you kind of saw this massive explosion in fintech companies that brought a lot of like banking and financial services to consumers there, which made them more digitally native and be much more willing and able to spend money to buy things online with their disposable income. And so the next stage of that development is like the boom of the e-commerce and direct to consumer industries there. And certainly our folks on the inside over at Meta are definitely telling us that right now. They're like, get some folks in Latin America, right? Like get a team that's Spanish speaking that can do business there, sell contracts, because it is booming right now. It is growing very fast. And I think that right now, currently, Latin America is their fastest growing market. And so they're encouraging us as a partner to establish a presence and be able to do business there to like really capitalize on that tidal wave that's coming right now. So it's a really exciting place. Like it's a really exciting place to be for an e-commerce company right now, Latin America. And certainly we are investing in building out an engineering team and a company presence overall in Latin right now.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's great too. Personally, I'm biased because I'm on the same time zone, and if you, it's way easier to work with people and chat with people in South America than it is in Asia or India. So that's great to hear, and congrats on all the progress, man. Are you active on social media? Personally, are you tweeting or writing on Medium or anything?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of tweeting at Dan Pantelo on Twitter, so you can catch me and hang out with me there. You can also follow our company, Marpipe, on Twitter, or you can, if you're interested in checking out our product and seeing if it's a good fit for you, just go to marpipe.com, and you'll be able to just jump right on with one of our team members to find out, see how it works and see if it's a fit for you.
Sweet, man. Well, congrats on all the progress, dude. I hope you keep crushing it. So hope you have you back on
Thanks,
one day.
Mike. Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
See you, Dan.
Appreciate it. This was fun. See ya.